Story 1. A giant freshwater stingray was larger than the four-person raft. We were camping, and I couldn't wait for my parents and the other adults to wake up so I could tell everyone what I saw. That was a mistake. I ended up getting a punishment for going out on the lake alone and also for lying because stingrays are in the ocean, not lakes. I know otherwise. I saw it. Story 2. I came across a golden eagle on the ground, with a snake halfway down its throat, partially choking on it because the snake had wrapped itself around the eagle's leg while I was on a bike ride in high school. I got off my bike to look at it and ended up creeping close to unwrap the snake so that the eagle could swallow it. It did, looked at me oddly, and then flew away. I don't share this story often because I know that nobody will believe it. Story 3. I assume people believe me now because it has a Wikipedia page, but at the time it was really strange. When I saw the Phoenix lights, it really freaked me out. Story 4. When I was 10 years old, a green woodpecker got stuck in a jujube tree in our yard. The tree had many dense branches, and the bird couldn't find its way out after squeezing in. I went over, carefully caught it, and set it free. But when I told my parents about it, they didn't believe me. Story 5. Back in college, I saw a squirrel methodically unwrap a Snickers bar it found on a bench. This little creature held it with both paws and carefully peeled the wrapper off before eating it. Story 6. A fast food worker drops food on the floor, picks it up, and continues to cook or serve it. Story 7. I was once lying outdoors. It was really early, around 7 a.m. A bird came and stood on my foot. I was wearing a sock. Story 8. A child ghost appeared to me twice, and I experienced other spooky occurrences in that room. It wore a mask, specifically a smiling comedy tragedy theater mask. The first time, it sat in the corner of my room facing me, legs outstretched. Its hands were on the sides of its head, and it tilted its head to the left for a few seconds, then to the right, and so on. It disappeared when I turned on my light. I saw it a second time, maybe a year later. I was awakened in the night and rolled over to see the same figure. But this time it was running, well, trotting around my room. It moved like a toddler, slowly and wobbly, going in circles around the middle of my bedroom. Again, turning on the lights made it vanish. I don't know if it was dreams or sleep paralysis, but I remember it vividly, and it was the exact same figure. Story 9. A few winters ago, I was driving down a main road in my city, going about 25 miles per hour due to heavy traffic and icy conditions when my car started sliding. The moment I bumped into the car in front of me, it completely vanished. It literally disappeared. Story 10. A black Florida panther was practically face to face with me when I was a wild child. I was always in the woods and came off a trail into an open space, and there he was, standing still and looking at me maybe 60 feet away. We stood still for a moment, looking at each other, and then he casually turned and walked back into the woods. In my mind, he was a male. I never considered he could be a female. I'm not sure why. Black Florida panthers aren't supposed to exist. So there's that. Story 11. The dentist I worked for punched a patient in the stomach several times because the patient was unknowingly moving around too much while under anesthesia. The patient was a high school student. Although he was a large football player, he was still just a kid. Story 12. Colors, textures, and shapes occupy space in my visual field and are triggered by emotional states. I can perceive emotions, and I have only shared this with one person, which frightens me. I am 36 and have no idea what to do about it. Story 13. When my son was born, his mother finally found the strength to leave the hospital room. While she was gone, a man entered with a seashell of holy water, baptized and blessed my son and me, then left. Later, I asked a nurse about who it was, and she said no such person was on that well-guarded floor. I know I wasn't asleep and still can't explain it. Story 14. We were driving from West Texas to Austin, and as I was falling asleep, I saw a rhino in someone's pasture. I begged my dad to turn around, but no one believed me. Every road trip after that included comments like, "Maybe we'll see a rhino." I was around 10 years old and could recognize a rhino when I saw one. However, I did get redemption. When I was 18, we were driving home from Austin. and my parents stopped the car and woke me up with very guilty expressions. I was confused until they pointed at the rhino. Granted, it was a statue, but it was life-size and very realistic. Story 15. Baby Pigeon. I was so amazed I walked right into a lamppost and knocked myself out. No one believed me. Story 16. A few years ago, I saw a man on a riding lawnmower being pulled down the sidewalk by 3 Labrador retrievers, as if they were huskies competing in the Iditarod. Story 17. I see dead people. No, that's Kendrick. I saw an unidentified flying object while on an inbound flight into O'Hare in 1989. At the time, I was an active-duty United States Air Force meteorologist and an aviation enthusiast. And to this day, I haven't found any human-made or natural phenomenon that describes or explains what I witnessed. Story 18. I saw a strange spirit watching me in nature. I got scared after about 15 minutes and threw a rock at it. Then it became frightening and chased me out of the bushes. I have never experienced such an intense feeling of needing to get out of there immediately. Story 19. I saw a full-body apparition that disappeared when I took my eyes off it. As a child, my mother and I witnessed a large hovering ball of light, sort of yellow-orange, tending toward orange. It was hovering over some trees, and their tops were whipping back and forth as if the wind was blowing really intensely, but it was a still summer night. We were less than 100 yards away, sitting in a car. The unidentified flying object was the size of a small house. It never moved, but the edges appeared to be pulsating like a plasma ball, I guess. Story 20. Not seen but heard. I used to hear someone calling me when I was a child. I went to the doctor, but no condition was detected. Time passed and it went away. However, the same thing happened around the same time the following year. Story 21. I once saw a full rainbow at night. Nobody believed me, yet it was pale and silvery, like the ghost of a rainbow. Story 22. Alright, story time. It's honestly so cliché. A ghost. Or what I believe to be a ghost. I was walking my dog. I always take one late night walk, so she can sleep through the night and not wake up because she needs to go out. My dog is still a puppy and quite sensitive to smell. When we reached the city's park, she started barking at the monument. We have a few Jewish people from our town who sadly died, and that's what the monument is for, related to World War II. I got closer, and I swear I heard footsteps from there. The dog was freaking out, and I was starting to too. I didn't want to get closer because I thought it might be a person walking around at midnight. So, I walked around in a wide circle, and I swear there was a hand on one of the stone columns. Everyone I tell this to says it was probably a person and that I was lucky they just left. The problem is that I never saw them leave. They just disappeared. I never really saw anyone, just the footsteps and that eerie hand. Story 23. I saw a meteorite hit the water at 4 a.m. at Dromina Pier in Victoria, Australia. I was very high and thought I was hallucinating until my friends started freaking out. There was an older man fishing nearby, and he said, "Oh, that happens all the time." Sure, mate. Story 24. I watched a man walk across a 2-lane freeway between 2 cars traveling at 120 kilometers per hour. No one braked. He looked like he didn't notice, almost as if he and the cars were in different universes. I was about 100 meters back, and I braked. This happened around 40 years ago. I have no explanation. Story 25. I'll preface this by saying that, no, I do not believe in unidentified flying objects, but one night, while driving home, I saw 2 small red lights in the sky moving around. This was before drones, and it definitely wasn't any aircraft I was familiar with. Someone suggested it was Venus, but I am familiar with the planets as well. I do not know what it was, but I also know what it was not. Story 26. I saw a deer defecating. It was squatting like a dog. Everyone tells me deer don't defecate that way, but I know what I saw. Story 27. A squirrel fell out of a tree, landed on its feet, and then continued running as if nothing had happened. It looked at me as if to say, "You saw nothing." Story 28. My dog once barked at an empty corridor for a full minute before wagging his tail as if he saw someone. I refused to accept that I wasn't being haunted. Story 29. It's kind of lame, but I have seen ghosts or spirits since I was about 4. Only my mom and best friend really believe me, so I sound insane when I talk about them. Story 30. I once saw a squirrel steal an entire slice of pizza and drag it up a tree as if it owed him money. No one believes me. Story 31. In the English Midlands, I was driving a small convertible sports car on winding country roads around midnight as I needed fresh air and was bored at home. I saw a puma. It was cat-like but massive. It was large enough that I had to take evasive action to avoid hitting it. Otherwise, it would have caused significant damage to my car. I veered off the road and ended up with minor damage and a broken thumb. If it had been a cat or small animal, as horrible as it sounds, I would have taken the hit in that particular situation. No one believes me, but there have been rumors of large cats in rural areas of the Midlands. Story 32. I saw a kangaroo once at the top of my street, even though I live in upstate New York. I was about 8 years old, but I vividly remember it. Story 33. I saw a sucker fish that was as thick as my thigh and as long as my leg while tubing in the summer about 8 years ago. Story 34. I watched a hummingbird fall asleep mid-flight and drop into my flower bed. I thought it was dead, but nope, it was just taking a power nap. Story 35. My sister and I saw 3 small kids leaving a car at a rest stop on an interstate through the driver's seat after parking there. There was no adult in the car, and they were behaving like 3 men in a coat style. It was literally the most bizarre thing ever. Story 36. I once saw a raccoon press the button for the crosswalk, wait for the light to turn green, and then cross the street. My girlfriend at the time saw it too, so at least one person believes me. Story 37. Well, when I was much younger, I'm talking decades ago, during a time when the world seemed much simpler, and we had not yet developed the cynicism that overlays our society like a deep veneer, a smothering quilt of jaded perspectives. This led us to question the meaning of our existence and to ponder whether humanity is comprehensible to itself, prone to an innocence since lost in the turmoil of adulthood and the strife of this modern era. It was at this time and within this context that I am pretty sure, though not definitively, that I saw my mother kissing Santa Claus. Story 38. Basically, everything I say comes back to me in 2 days, and people act like, that's my idea. It's incredibly frustrating, especially when I'm thinking something, and someone else states what I was thinking a couple of weeks or months ago. Story 39. I mostly agree with friends who passed at the same time that it was probably a particularly beautiful white horse, but what was that on its head? It was clearly a unicorn. Story 40. I was walking around campus when I blinked and caught a small flying insect on my eyelid. It was completely accidental. I don't know, it may not be unbelievable, but it is highly improbable. Story 41. I observed a man balancing a full grocery cart on 2 wheels while speeding around a corner. It was truly the most impressive sight I had ever seen. Story 42. A car in front of me hit a pothole so deep that it bounced back up like a cartoon. I still don't understand how it didn't become stuck in the ground. Story 43. I always feel left out in these discussions because I am either the most stubborn skeptic alive or nothing even slightly out of the ordinary has ever happened to me. No unusual sightings, no strange feelings, no odd sounds, nothing at all. Story 44. I remember as a child seeing a hand, somewhat ghostly, crawl over the side of my window while I was in the back seat. No one believed me and thought I was just dreaming, as children often do, but I still remember it very vividly. Another time, about 2 years ago, my husband and I drove to a nearby beach to watch the northern lights. Just as we were about to leave the car, we saw a white van flashing its lights behind us. We closed the doors, turned our car around, and the van was gone. We started driving back and used our high beams to look around, but we couldn't see the van anymore. The strange thing is that it all happened within a few seconds, and there was no place for the van to have hidden quickly, as everything around us was open with no buildings or trees. It just disappeared. Story 45. A frozen squirrel in my backyard. I went to get a shovel to move it, and there was a bat directly underneath, still barely alive, hissing at me. I put the poor animal out of its misery and buried it next to the squirrel. Usually, My dog picks up dead animals, but this morning he just stood there and barked at it. Story 46. I saw the ghost of a Victorian woman. We made eye contact, and then she walked into my boyfriend's sister's room. It was around 3:30 in the morning when this happened. She appeared like an impression in the air, similar to how a human egg looks under a microscope. Story 47. I stayed up late one night to watch an eclipse or meteor shower. I was using a star app on my phone that showed me the locations of various celestial objects. Planets, stars, satellites, and more. At one point during the night, I felt the ground slowly moving beneath me. Not like an earthquake, but more like a subtle shift. Simultaneously, I witnessed Mars streak across the sky and settle into a new position. It was as if the universe realized a glitch and corrected it. Story 48. A Mexican standoff occurred between a dog and a rabbit. I came around the corner of a barn, and the rabbit emerged from the side, while the dog approached from some nearby horse pens. We all stopped simultaneously and exchanged glances. I looked at the dog, then at the rabbit. The rabbit looked at me and then at the dog, while the dog observed the rabbit before looking back at me. It must have been only a few seconds, but it felt like it lasted a full minute. Then the rabbit took off and the dog chased after it. I stood there laughing at what had just transpired. Story 49. Not one, but two large cats crossed my bicycle commute to work when I lived in rural West Wales. My partner at the time was with me for the second encounter. Chilled me to the bone on both occasions. The cat was definitely aware of me long before I was aware of it. I am 60% certain they were the same cat, and 99% sure both were pumas. Story 50. Needing a drink while homeless. You try to sleep on hard concrete behind a church after 14 hours of being on your feet. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.